Welcome everyone to XpoNorth Digital Shorts. I am overwhelmed with our guest today. I'm so excited. We have David Smith here, who is the Director of Screen for Screen Scotland.
That's
David,
right.
thank you very much for joining us.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
I know you're really busy, so I promise I will try to keep it within the 15 minutes, but I have so much to ask you. So first, can you explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so in terms of who I am, I'm from Inverness originally. My first job was as a projectionist at Eden Court Theatre, and second job was at Edinburgh Film Festival. From there, I became a lawyer, went to work in television, so I'm still a lawyer. I worked for Walt Clements and Company, then IWC Media. Then I formed with colleagues our own production company called Matchlight, which is ran from 2009 until now. It's still going at the moment, just finishing up some projects that are slowly appearing on television across the summer. So there's most recently I saw the trail for Beethoven, which is one of the projects that was starting up as I was leaving, which will be on BBC Two. I think later next week. I'm not sure when this is going out, but at the moment it's the 1st of July. So,
and that was documentary and factual, the work you guys did there.
Yeah, so we're a docs focused company, mainly arts and history, but also observational documentary. We work mostly for the BBC network, occasional projects, very occasional projects for Channel 4, but also projects where we worked with PBS in America and others. That's what it boiled down to. And it was so Ross Wilson is the creative director, probably the most respected documentary maker well, I would say the most respected documentary program maker in Scotland, and I was sorry to leave them, but the opportunity came up with Screen Scotland, and it was an opportunity I couldn't let go by.
And also, you're known for helping Glasgow become a creative hub for Channel 4. Did that happen while you were there, after?
So while I was MD at Matchlight, I also was PAC's National Director for Scotland. And just became aware of the fact that the opportunity, I can't remember what it was called now, for all UK, or I can't remember what the Channel 4's campaign was, but to move a substantial part of their operation outside of London, for all the UK, that was it, was underway. And Glasgow was in a prime position to kind of capture that opportunity. But at the same point, nothing really was going on. So all I did, and literally all I did, was raise this as something we should be thinking about. And very happily, the production community across Scotland, but primarily in Glasgow, Glasgow City Government, the council leadership within Glasgow very quickly and very solidly got behind it, as did the Scottish Government. And Susan Aiken and her team at Glasgow City Council pulled in Stuart Cosgrove, and it's really his victory. I mean, he and the City Council won the bid. They pulled the whole project together, put together a really compelling document. It was, for me, the definition of the medium is the message. If you've seen the bid document, it just portrays Glasgow as a really clever, thoughtful, visual city. It's a fantastic piece of pitch documentation, I guess, is probably the best way of putting it. I wish I had a copy, but there are so few made that they're quite rare now. Anyway, yeah, happily Glasgow won the bid. Jo Street is now the head of Channel 4's base in Glasgow, also the commissioner for daytime. And as far as I'm aware, she's the only head of genre or channel controller whose job is based outside of London in the UK. And actually the only one whose job is based outside of a few small postcodes within central London. So for that to be the position of our national broadcasters in 2020 is, I think, indefensible.
That is a huge improvement, I have to say, to get that kind of focus and attention. And one improvement.
Commissioner,
you're
yes.
Quite right, and I like the ambition. So tell me a little bit. You moved from on the ground production to now where you are, which is such a great perspective to have. Can you tell me a little bit about the role within Creative Scotland and what's happening now for Screen Scotland?
Yeah, so Screen Scotland, it sits within Creative Scotland, as you correctly say, but we're a partnership with other agencies, so Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Scottish Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, and the Scottish Funding Council. But we have sovereignty essentially over the screen sector, and we sit within Creative Scotland. And my email address is a Creative Scotland email address, even though I am the director of Screen Scotland. That confuses people, but essentially think of us as Screen Scotland. Our agency, our partnership agency, is there to support different aspects of film and television. So there's an exhibition aspect to that. So we support cinemas, cultural cinemas, community cinemas, and what we call regularly funded organisations across the whole of Scotland. In the last kind of 24 hours, we've announced our cinema equipment fund, the final round of our cinema equipment fund, which is helping cinemas, remain digitally up to date, have their facilities, as it's about widening access to culture, to cinema. That's obviously a sector which, as a result of COVID-19, is really severely impacted. It's hard to know exactly when cinemas can reopen, and even if they can reopen, if the PPE measures of everything else allows reopening, if it's commercially viable for them to open right now. So that's a very big part of what we're thinking about, and it's been a large chunk of my morning so far today. At the same point, we're also responsible for production across film and television and development across film and television. So skills development, talent development, and I can talk about what the difference is between those two if you like, but broadly speaking, skills is about the workforce, talent is about editorial, the people that generate the IP that is then made by the workforce. We talk about the difference between film and television. Creative Scotland's screen function was traditionally focused on film because the money that supported the activity was lottery money. The Scottish Government 2 years ago came forward with a 3-year plan with an additional £10 million per annum to support screen work in its totality, including television. Hence my arrival. I've been brought in part to kind of deliver that TV world thinking into the organisation. But we've also just appointed 3 other heads of, a head of scripted, a head of unscripted, and a head of production. So we have Kieran Hannigan joining us from the BBC's River City, where he's been an executive producer for the last 4 years. We've got a very highly regarded factual director and producer, Danny Carlow, who joins us next month as head of unscripted. And Stephen Little, who's going to join us from Blazing Griffin as our head of production, where he was the head of production at Blazing Griffin. So injecting that industry expertise alongside the already really competent team within Screen Scotland. And that's one of the things I think coming from outside, the ways and means of Creative Scotland were sometimes a little bit mysterious. But, I've joined a team that is remarkably diligent, remarkably focused, remarkably positive about trying to make a difference, and it's great. Obviously, the circumstances since March have not been what we anticipated.
No, I was just going to ask about that in terms of, it's amazing you guys are being not only responsive, I think, to some of the needs of transparency and access, but tell me a little bit about COVID-19 and how. You mentioned about the needs of the exhibition part and the cinemas, but also the filmmakers. So many, I have to be completely honest, I'm a filmmaker, and so many of my projects are not only completely paused because they were in the process of either being sold or needing to be pitched, but a lot of them having now to translate into podcasts because the actors are home and there's no filming at the moment. So tell me a little bit about how you guys are responding.
Sure. So we, from day one, I think we were all moved to home working a couple of days before Boris Johnson announced the official lockdown. And immediately, our colleagues in Creative Scotland in particular were conscious of the need to generate some bursary income for the creative sector. So we worked with them, but they led, and we were happy to kind of piggyback on their really good work, the process to deliver bursaries to people who worked either as genuinely self-employed within the definition of HMRC of what self-employed means, but also contract PAYE workers, people who move from project to project on PAYE contracts. But the people we couldn't help at that stage, and we've still not found a way to help necessarily, are those who work at low-night companies. But the bursaries were launched in, I think, March the 20th. So you can see it's quite an early response. Don't hold me to that date, I may have misremembered that. But the bursaries were launched quite quickly, and Screen has 800 odd applications. We've awarded 600 plus bursaries, combined value of 1.3 million. That wasn't the full value of the ask, but obviously we had to close the bursary when the ask became a higher number than we had availability for, and some were excluded from the fund because they didn't meet the criteria. So the criteria, quite simply, were you had to work within film and television, including exhibition. If you worked within commercials, I'm afraid we couldn't help. If you worked within the corporate video sector, I'm sorry, but we couldn't help because that wasn't core to what we exist to do. And it's really about sustaining people's careers in screen. So the bursaries have now been complete. I think I've just signed off on the last one this morning. The reason there are still some that took slightly longer is often the evidence presented wasn't enough to support. So we were going the distance and trying to work out with people, genuinely, do you meet the criteria, or have you simply not provided us with the evidence, or is there no evidence to provide? So it's been a quite diligent process. Alongside that, we also launched what we call a single project development funding route. So broadly speaking, we have 3 funds for the production of screen content. The Production Growth Fund, which is about the big projects we draw into Scotland. So Fast and Furious 9, currently waiting a cinema release. Eurovision, which was launched on Netflix at the end of June. But also, there are lots of big projects that come through regularly. The criteria for that fund is things that would not otherwise be made within Scotland, that we can draw in as part of that internationally competitive marketplace for film production. Set that one to one side. That's about 10% of our overall funding. So it's the minority of our funding, but it's really quite important in terms of providing work to the crew base and upskilling the crew base on a kind of ongoing basis. We then also have the Film Development and Production Fund and the Broadcast Content Fund. Film is obviously about film, theatrical things, projects intended for theatrical release. Broadcast is about projects intended for television release, and that means Netflix and Amazon as well as the public service broadcasters. So within those two, film and broadcast, we launched £500,000 single project development routes, where we altered our rules to make it possible for more people to access the funds sooner, so that we could stimulate as much development activity. If production is not possible, focus on development. And coming from television, production company is a misnomer. You spend the majority of your time in development. You are a development company that is occasionally allowed to make a production. Okay. So let's fund the activity we could support. So that was development. And I think that's been useful. We're oversubscribed. We have a £1.3 million ask against £1 million worth of available funding, but we're going to try our best to kind of, meet all of that ask as best we can. Every project's interrogated. We don't just hand out the money on the basis of, it sounds good. So the bursaries required no action. It was a grant. These single project development routes do require activity. We want to see an output, and obviously we interrogate the budget, make sure that what we're funding is valid. So that's an ongoing process. It's keeping us very busy, but yeah, it's good to see that there is so much we can support. And then the other really important piece of work that we've been doing is, and this I think is probably not as visible as it could be, is we've been working with the British Film Commission, the BFI Screen Sector Task Force, to ensure there are guidelines in place for the restart of production, which under phase 2, once the guidelines are agreed, it becomes possible.
Are we close to meeting the guidelines at the moment?
The guidelines are published, and we're in the process of getting them approved by the Scottish Government. That work's intense, I would say. But yes, there are lots of projects looking to restart production in August or September, and that's a vital precursor to that happening.
Yeah, that's great, because I know of some too. So
yeah.
I think everyone's looking for that green light. And I know some other countries, I think Iceland and some other places are already on the ball. And I feel like Scotland can do that too. So I'm really glad to hear that's in the works.
No, I mean, there are so many kind of, quarantine plays a part in this. Availability of insurance is a big factor. We're again working with Scottish Government and the UK Government with DCMS and Treasury. So there's a lot of activity that goes on behind the scenes, which, we can't always kind of be open about, because it has to there is no definitive answer yet. It's how you get to the definitive answer. That's when we announce it. But please be reassured that we are doing everything we can.
That's so exciting. My last question about this, because we are running out of time, and there's so many I want to ask, and just being totally transparent, I think it's something that XpoNorth also asks themselves a lot, because we see people, independent filmmakers, who have a project and they've done it themselves, they funded it themselves, and it's a range from feature-length documentaries to little shorts that they've created. And I know a lot of people are still creating in lockdown.
Yeah.
But the hurdle that they need help with is access. So they hear that Netflix, even in like these massive keynote talks, that Netflix is buying up tons of content, or Amazon's always looking, or even Quibi, which I don't know if will survive now, but even Quibi was looking for short content.
Who knows?
Who knows? But as an individual, it is really difficult to break those barriers and pitch your project and get some visibility and even support for those kinds of things, any kind of champion who can attaching an actor or anything. Have you guys talked about that within Screen Scotland, about how to give people more access?
So it's not in our gift to give people access to Netflix, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said as individuals it's almost impossible to gain that access, and I think that's correct. It is almost impossible as individuals to gain that access. Obviously, the Amazon platforms you can upload your own content onto, and you can monetize in that way. Netflix is completely different. They will buy, but they will probably only buy from distributors or people they're already dealing with. So you need to find a distributor, is what it boils down to. Arguably that's a role that we could take a part within. So yeah, I'll take that on board, and we'll discuss it with Danny when she starts in July as our head of unscripted. But fundamentally, Netflix's business model is unique in that, though they are on an acquisition spree at the moment because there's not much that can be produced, essentially what they want to do is to own every stage of the process. So they own the production company, they own the production facility, they own the platform. It's all monetized directly through them. So it is a really difficult area to break into. That said, we did hold an event in Glasgow during Glasgow Film Festival, so in February, I think, where Netflix came up, their heads of physical production for the UK, but also some of their editorial team came up to Glasgow, and there was an open session. People were able to come along and meet them. So we are doing what we can to kind of widen access, but the commercial reality of it is they're going to deal with distributors. So you need to find that connection first, I would say.
That's super smart, and that's really good advice. David, speaking of advice, can you leave us with one thing that you've learned from your time going up through production to even now that you found that's supremely helpful that you might use in your daily life? Any kind of bit of advice?
So apart from getting some sleep, which we discussed just before the start of this interview, which I think is vital, the two things I think that are really important, and that I kind of that I learned through a lot of the production work. So Ross Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, who's the creative director of Matchlight, and who I respect hugely, is never satisfied. He's just never satisfied with a project. He works with it until it is as close to his level of satisfaction as possible, and as a result, it's of a high quality. So don't ever be easily satisfied. Always have that quality expectation that you have to push it a little bit further, a little bit better. You've got time. People will kill me for saying this, but fundamentally, coming in on time and coming in on budget is really important. But delivering something that absolutely knocks it out of the park and changes the narrative is what gets you your next gig. So don't be easily satisfied. It is the main point. And the other thing is finish what you start. Just finish what you start. And if you don't finish it, then it doesn't exist.
David, I feel like you're talking directly to me because I have half done screenplays like near my desk. So you're 100% right. That is really valuable advice. So good, two things to end on. Thank you so much for joining us at XpoNorth.
No worries. Thank you for having me. And, I hope all goes well. Stay safe.